What happens when prejudice blinds someone to the truth? Imagine this. You arrive at the airport, ready to board your own private jet, only to be denied entry by the very people hired to serve you. This isn't fiction. It's the story of Valeria Morales, a self-made billionaire and philanthropist who built her empire from nothing. But when a pilot's arrogance leads to a shocking act of discrimination, the consequences will leave everyone questioning their assumptions and their careers. It was a crisp morning at Miami International Airport, where the sun shimmered off the sleek silver body of a private jet parked on the tarmac. The aircraft bore the insignia of Morales Enterprises, a global powerhouse known for its innovation in technology and renewable energy. Valeria Morales stepped out of her black luxury SUV, dressed in a tailored navy blue blazer, white blouse, and high-waisted trousers that exuded confidence and authority. Her warm brown skin glowed under the morning light, and her dark hair was pulled back into a neat bun, accentuating her sharp features and piercing brown eyes. At 35 years old, Valeria had become one of the most influential Latina entrepreneurs in the world. But today, none of that seemed to matter. As she approached the jet, accompanied by her assistant, Carlos, the pilot, Jake, a middle-aged man with pale skin, short graying hair, and a dismissive demeanor, stepped forward to block her path. "Excuse me, ma'am," Jake said curtly, his tone dripping with condescension. "This is a private flight. I'm going to need to see some identification." Valeria raised an eyebrow, unfazed by his attitude. "This is my jet," she replied calmly, gesturing toward the Morales Enterprises logo emblazoned on the side of the plane. Jake scoffed, crossing his arms over his chest. "Right. And I'm the President of the United States," he muttered sarcastically. "Look, lady, if you're trying to sneak onto this flight, you've got the wrong idea. This jet belongs to Ms. Morales herself. She'll be here any minute." Valeria's expression hardened slightly, though she maintained her composure. "I am Ms. Morales," she stated firmly, pulling out her ID badge and holding it up for him to see. But Jake barely glanced at it. Instead, he rolled his eyes and turned to his co-pilot, chuckling. "Yeah, sure, and I'm flying to the moon next week." Carlos, Valeria's assistant, stepped forward, visibly irritated. "Sir, this is unacceptable. You're speaking to Valeria Morales, CEO of Morales Enterprises. If you have a problem, take it up with corporate." Jake waved them off dismissively. "Corporate? Right. Like they'd let someone like her run a company like that." The words hung in the air, heavy with prejudice. Valeria felt a surge of anger bubbling inside her, but she forced herself to stay calm. She had faced skepticism and discrimination before, but this was different. This wasn't just about her. It was about every Latina who had ever been underestimated or dismissed because of stereotypes. "Fine," Valeria said coolly, stepping back. "We'll wait for your supervisor to arrive. But trust me, you'll regret this moment." Jake smirked, clearly unconvinced. "Whatever you say, sweetheart." In moments like these, ignorance can lead to consequences no one sees coming. For Jake, this encounter would become a lesson he'd never forget. But for Valeria, it was more than just proving her identity. It was about standing up for herself and everyone who had ever been told they didn't belong. Minutes later, the ground supervisor arrived, a man named Robert, in his late 40s, with a no-nonsense demeanor and a clipboard in hand. He approached Jake, Valeria, and Carlos, his expression neutral but alert. "What seems to be the issue here?" Robert asked, glancing between Valeria and Jake. Jake stepped forward, his tone defensive. This woman tried to board the jet without proper clearance. She claims she's Valeria Morales. But come on, does she look like a billionaire CEO to you? Valeria's jaw tightened slightly, but she remained composed. She turned to Robert and said calmly, "I am Valeria Morales. This is my aircraft, and I was denied entry by your pilot. I'd like an explanation and an apology." Robert blinked, clearly caught off guard. He glanced at the jet, then back at Valeria. Her poise and professionalism were undeniable, but he still needed confirmation. "Ma'am, do you have any identification or documentation to verify your identity?" Valeria handed him her ID badge and a copy of the flight manifest, which clearly listed her name as the owner of the aircraft. Robert scanned the documents, his eyes widening as he realized the truth. This is legitimate," Robert stammered, looking up at Jake. "She really is Valeria Morales." Jake's face went pale. "What? No way. That's impossible." "It's not impossible," Valeria interjected, her voice sharp but controlled. "It's just hard for some people to believe that a Latina woman could build a multi-billion-dollar company. Isn't that right, Jake?" Jake opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. His arrogance had crumbled in an instant, replaced by sheer panic as he realized the gravity of his mistake. Robert, now visibly irritated, turned to Jake. "You've caused a serious issue here. Denying access to a passenger, let alone the owner of the aircraft, is unacceptable. You're suspended pending further investigation." Jake's eyes widened in disbelief. "Wait, what? You can't do that. I didn't know who she was." "That's exactly the problem," Robert shot back. "You judged her based on appearances instead of doing your job. That's not how we operate here." The power shift. As Jake was escorted away, Valeria watched silently, her expression unreadable. Carlos leaned in and whispered, "Do you want me to call corporate security? We could press charges if you'd like." Valeria shook her head. "No, Carlos. Legal action isn't the answer here. This isn't about revenge. It's about teaching a lesson. Let his employer handle it." Robert approached Valeria once more, this time with genuine remorse. "Ms. Morales, I deeply apologize for what happened today. This is not the standard we strive for, and I assure you we'll take immediate steps to prevent anything like this from happening again." "Thank you," Valeria replied, her tone measured but firm. "But apologies aren't enough. I'd like to see systemic changes. Better training for your staff, clearer protocols for handling passengers, and zero tolerance for discrimination. Can you make that happen?" Robert nodded vigorously. "Absolutely, Ms. Morales. Consider it done." Later that evening, Jake sat alone in his small apartment, staring blankly at the wall. He had been officially terminated from his position, and his reputation in the aviation industry was in shambles. The weight of his actions and the prejudice behind them finally hit him. He thought about Valeria Morales, her calm demeanor, her confidence, and the sheer scale of her success. For the first time, he began to question his own biases. Why had he assumed she couldn't be who she claimed to be? Was it her appearance, her accent, or simply the fact that she didn't fit his narrow idea of what a billionaire should look like? Meanwhile, Valeria returned to her office in downtown Miami, where she spent the afternoon drafting a new initiative aimed at combating discrimination in the aviation industry. She titled it Wings of Equality, a program designed to educate airline staff and pilots on cultural sensitivity and unconscious bias. "This isn't just about me," she told her team during a meeting later that day. "It's about every person who has ever been judged unfairly because of their race, gender, or background. If we don't speak up and take action, nothing will change." Her team nodded in agreement, inspired by her determination to turn a negative experience into something positive. In life, moments of injustice can either break us or push us to create change. For Valeria Morales, this encounter wasn't just about proving her identity. It was about standing up for herself and paving the way for others. And for Jake, it was a harsh reminder that assumptions based on prejudice can cost you everything. The fallout from the incident at Miami International Airport spread quickly. News outlets picked up the story after an anonymous whistleblower leaked details to the press. Headlines like "Pilot Fired After Denying Latina Billionaire," "Access to Her Own Jet," and "Valeria Morales Speaks Out Against Discrimination in Aviation" dominated social media feeds and evening news broadcasts. For Valeria, the attention was both unexpected and overwhelming. She had never sought the spotlight for personal grievances, but she recognized the opportunity to amplify her message. In interviews with major networks, she spoke candidly about her experience, emphasizing that it wasn't just about her. It was about systemic issues of bias and discrimination. "This isn't the first time something like this has happened to me," Valeria admitted during a live interview on CNN. "And it certainly won't be the last, not just for me, but for countless others who face prejudice every single day. My hope is that by sharing my story, we can spark meaningful conversations and drive real change." Her words resonated deeply with audiences around the world. Social media platforms were flooded with hashtags like "Her Respect, Her Seat," "Equality in Aviation," and "You Stand with Valeria." People shared their own stories of being underestimated or mistreated because of stereotypes, creating a groundswell of support for Valeria's cause. Meanwhile, Jake's life unraveled further. His termination made headlines, painting him as the poster child for workplace discrimination. Former colleagues distanced themselves from him, fearing guilt by association, while online trolls bombarded his social media accounts with hateful comments. Desperate to salvage his reputation, Jake reached out to Valeria directly, sending her a lengthy email apologizing for his behavior. "Ms. Morales," he wrote, his tone contrite, "I want to start by saying how sorry I am for what happened at the airport. I was wrong, so incredibly wrong, to judge you based on appearances. It was unprofessional, disrespectful, and completely unacceptable. I've spent the past few days reflecting on my actions, and I realize now how harmful my biases have been, not just to you, but to others as well. I know an apology doesn't undo the damage I caused, but I truly hope you'll consider giving me a second chance. If there's anything I can do to make amends, please let me know." Valeria read the email carefully, her expression thoughtful. While part of her wanted to dismiss it outright, another part recognized that genuine remorse could be a starting point for growth. She decided to respond, not to absolve him, but to challenge him to do better. "Jake," she replied, "your apology is a step in the right direction, but actions speak louder than words. If you're serious about making amends, I suggest you enroll in diversity training programs and volunteer your time to organizations working toward equality. Use this experience as a catalyst for change, not just in yourself, but in those around you. That's the only way to truly move forward." Inspired by the public response to her story, Valeria launched Wings of Equality with unprecedented speed. The program partnered with airlines, airports, and aviation schools across the country to provide comprehensive training on cultural sensitivity, unconscious bias, and inclusive practices. The initiative also included mentorship opportunities for young women and minorities interested in careers in aviation, a field historically dominated by white men. Valeria personally mentored several aspiring pilots and engineers, using her platform to uplift the next generation of leaders. At its core, Wings of Equality wasn't just about addressing discrimination. It was about redefining what leadership looked like in the aviation industry. By showcasing diverse role models and fostering inclusive environments, Valeria hoped to create a future where no one would ever be judged based on stereotypes again. Months later, Valeria received an invitation to speak at a global aviation summit in Geneva. As she took the stage, the audience erupted into applause, a mix of admiration and gratitude for everything she had done. "Thank you," she began, her voice steady and powerful. "Today, I stand before you not as a victim of discrimination, but as a champion for change. What happened to me at Miami International Airport was not unique. It was a reflection of the biases that exist in every corner of our society. But here's the thing. We have the power to change that. Each of us has a responsibility to challenge our assumptions, educate ourselves, and advocate for others. Together, we can build an industry and a world that values people for who they are, not for how they look or where they come from." As she concluded her speech, the room erupted into a standing ovation. Among the crowd was Jake, who had traveled to Geneva at his own expense to hear her speak. Though he didn't approach her afterward, he left the event with a renewed sense of purpose, determined to prove that he had learned from his mistakes. In the end, Valeria Morales didn't just overcome discrimination. She transformed it into an opportunity for growth and progress. Her story reminds us that even in moments of injustice, there is always a chance to rise above, inspire others, and create lasting change. In the months following the launch of Wings of Equality, Valeria Morales became a global symbol of resilience and empowerment. Her story transcended borders, inspiring people from all walks of life to challenge prejudice and advocate for equality. The initiative gained traction not only in the aviation industry, but also in other sectors, with companies adopting similar programs to address systemic biases. Valeria's leadership extended beyond her role as CEO of Morales Enterprises. She was invited to speak at universities, conferences, and international forums, where she shared her vision for a more inclusive world. Her speeches often ended with the same rallying cry: "Discrimination thrives when we stay silent. But when we stand together, when we demand better, we have the power to dismantle it. Let's build a future where everyone is judged by their actions, not their appearances." Her words resonated deeply, sparking movements and initiatives that reached far beyond what she had initially imagined. For Jake, the road to redemption was long and difficult. After attending multiple diversity training programs and volunteering with organizations focused on equality, he began to understand the depth of his mistakes. He realized that his actions hadn't just affected Valeria. They had reinforced harmful stereotypes and perpetuated systemic discrimination. Determined to make amends, Jake applied for a position at a small regional airline that prioritized inclusivity and community engagement. During his interview, he openly acknowledged his past behavior and explained how he had worked to educate himself and grow. "I'm not proud of what I did," he admitted to the hiring manager. "But I've spent the last year learning about the impact of bias and how to combat it. If given the chance, I want to use my experience to help others avoid making the same mistakes I did." Impressed by his honesty and commitment to change, the airline hired him as a junior pilot. Over time, Jake became an advocate for diversity within the company, mentoring young pilots and speaking at workshops about overcoming prejudice. While he knew he could never undo the harm he had caused, he hoped his efforts would contribute to a more equitable future. One evening, nearly 2 years after the incident at Miami International Airport, Jake found himself boarding a flight as part of his new role. As he prepared for takeoff, he noticed a familiar face seated in first class. It was Valeria Morales. Their eyes met briefly, and Jake hesitated, unsure of how to proceed. Finally, he approached her, his voice trembling slightly. "Ms. Morales," he said, "I know there's no excuse for what I did, but I want you to know that your message has stayed with me. It's changed the way I see the world and myself. Thank you for holding me accountable." Valeria studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Thank you for taking responsibility and doing the work to grow," she replied. "That's all any of us can ask for, to learn from our mistakes and strive to be better." With that, she returned to her seat, leaving Jake with a renewed sense of purpose. Back at Morales Enterprises, Valeria reflected on how far she had come since that fateful day at the airport. What had started as a personal affront had evolved into a global movement, touching countless lives and reshaping industries. She often thought about the ripple effect of her actions. The young Latina girl who dreamed of becoming a pilot because she saw someone like herself in Valeria. The corporate leaders who implemented anti-discrimination policies inspired by Wings of Equality, and even Jake, whose journey toward redemption proved that change was possible. "It's not about me," Valeria reminded herself. "It's about the collective effort to create a world where everyone belongs." In life, moments of injustice can either break us or push us to create change. For Valeria Morales, this encounter wasn't just about proving her identity. It was about standing up for herself and paving the way for others. And for Jake, it was a harsh reminder that assumptions based on prejudice can cost you everything. But in the end, their stories remind us of something greater, that even in the face of adversity, we have the power to rise above, inspire others, and build a brighter future. Because true strength lies not in holding on to anger, but in using our experiences to uplift those around us.